welcome to Solosaurus, a podcast about one-player board and card games. My name is Brandon Waite.
And my name is Will Hedrick.
And this is episode 37, where we're talking about a game that is supposedly about building an ancient civilization, but is really just about Euro mechanics. Gentes. But before we get into that, we have a special guest host for this episode. So Carter is out of town and attending a family event this week, so he won't be able to record like normal. So we have Will Hedrick. And you probably remember Will because he was in everybody's favorite episode of Solosaurus, which was the Star Realms review.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's canonized as a classic at this point.
I think it is. Yeah. Enough people have bought it on our recommendation that it is definitely a classic episode.
Yeah.
So if you haven't yet listened to the Star Realms episode, what are you doing? Go back and listen to it after you've listened to this one all the way through so that the listen counts for our numbers. So I'm really excited to have Will with us on this episode. This is actually his copy of Gentes that we're going to be looking at, the deluxeified version. So just keep that in mind when we get to the review. But first, we're going to do what we always do and start with the news. Our first bit of news this week is Underwater Cities, which is the game by Vladimir Suchy about building underwater cities that involves terraforming Mars like engine building with some worker placement. That is getting an expansion at Spiel this year, which is pretty exciting because a lot of people really love this game.
I've seen pictures of it, but I haven't actually seen it out on a table or anything like that.
I haven't either, but it looks so good.
It does.
It has kelp as a resource.
I mean, who doesn't love kelp?
I saw a post one time where somebody was arguing that kelp was overpowered, and I thought, we don't have enough of these discussions. So, if you don't think kelp is overpowered and you really love this game, check out this new expansion. It's going to include better player boards, which is exciting because the old ones are pretty thin. Some new cards, new personal assistants, and, quote, one big surprise, according to the very short description on the Board Game Geek page. So, that's pretty exciting. If you like Underwater Cities, that's coming out at the Essen Spiel show later this year. Our second bit of news is that Roxley Games, which is famous for its Dice Throne series, has announced a new expansion for Dice Throne called Dice Throne Adventures, which is on Kickstarter right now as of us recording this. And this is a little bit weird because Dice Throne is basically like a competitive Street Fighter, Mortal Kombat meets King of Tokyo game.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with it.
It has lots of dice. You use those dice to attack people by getting certain combinations on the dice. And it looks like kind of lightweight, very popular, absolutely gorgeous artwork.
I do love chucking pretty dice.
Yeah, Roxley Games, everything that Roxley does just looks phenomenal. And this is no exception. This is a little bit different, though, because it adds sort of like a dungeon crawl adventure style thing to that formula and allows you to play the game cooperatively and apparently solo. So they said that the solo mode, or the cooperative mode, I guess, is inspired by Diablo, which is cool. Has exploration, gold, treasures, upgrades, minions, and epic boss battles, according to the Kickstarter page. So there's that. And plus, this Kickstarter also includes the option to pledge for the revamped version of Season 1 of Dice Throne.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. All of the different characters in Season 2 had these cool die-cut boards that looked really impressive on the table, whereas Season 1 just had big square boards. So you can get the new die-cut versions of the Season 1 characters if you want.
And everybody likes that good-looking, just table presence.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah, it sells.
If you're looking to drop a couple $100 on board games, Kickstarter's always got your back there, but Roxley has it right now. You can go back Dice Throne Adventures on Kickstarter right now. Our third game for this week is Etherfields from Awaken Realms, and I think this has made some money.
I think it's sitting at about 2.5 million, whatever their currency is. It's listed in so many different currencies.
Oh yeah, it's a huge game. Yeah. Anytime Awaken Realms puts stuff on Kickstarter nowadays, it feels like they came out of nowhere, and now that anytime they put something on Kickstarter, it's enormous.
Yeah, it feels like their campaigns and CMONs are just sitting there just punching each other in the face.
Yeah, exactly. They had the Nemesis Kickstarter and then the Tainted Grail, and now this one is a dream crawler, according to them, which is like a dungeon crawler but in dreams for 1 to 4 players. And the game says that it relies on your emotional intelligence to do well, which is a pretty compelling statement.
Yeah, it looks like there's some things in there that you're really going to have to see it played to understand. They're being pretty closed off with some of the details of how the game works because of the way the progression system in the game works too, from what I understand.
Oh yeah, and you probably don't want to spoil any of the story or anything like that, I guess.
But apparently the progression and the gameplay is tied in with the story, so they're just not telling people much of anything except buy this.
Oh, well, you can get some glimpse at the gameplay by watching Rahdo's run-through. I saw that one up a couple of days ago, and he seems to really like it. So if you're at all interested in Aetherfields, it's definitely beautiful.
I love the art.
Yeah, and it's going to come with a ton of stuff because we're going to unlock everything. I say we. I'm not backing this, but people will. People will unlock stuff. So check out Aetherfields on Kickstarter right now. And I guess this is just like the week for really big games because Serious Pulp, which is the publisher for Seventh Continent, has made 2 big announcements in the last couple of weeks. They have announced, first of all, that Seventh Continent, which is, if you've not heard of it, this huge exploration game where you're on an island and trying to find your way off the island or solve a mystery or something. I haven't played it yet. We do have it here at the house, and we are going to review it in the near future, so just stay tuned for that. But this is a game that everybody loves who's played it. I mean, they all seem to love it anyway. And it was, at one time, heralded as a Kickstarter exclusive game because it would just be too expensive to bring to retail. And so that's how it got millions of dollars in backing. I think the second print run got like $7 million on Kickstarter, which is crazy. Now it's not exclusive anymore. So there's a pared down Classic Edition coming to retail. So as I understand it, this doesn't include Kickstarter exclusive stuff. It doesn't include 2 of the characters that come in the game. It doesn't include minis, but it's just sort of a basic retail version of it. You're not missing that much.
So that we normal people can play it?
Yeah. Yeah. So that the rest of us can play.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you haven't yet played Seventh Continent and you were worried that you missed out, now you can get it, which is pretty cool. That's not out yet, but it will be coming out soon. What's also exciting is Serious Pulp did announce that Seventh Continent is done. It's a closed work now, which is kind of nice to know, actually, because some games it feels like you never know how to plan for storage because you never know how many more expansions are coming out. This one's done. They're creating a new one, though, called Seventh Citadel, which is apparently a dark fantasy take on this kind of exploration with a number of mechanical enhancements, apparently. So that's coming to Kickstarter in 2020, and there's no chance that it doesn't just go like gangbusters when it comes out.
Oh, I'm sure it's going to go nuts.
Yeah, they released 1 piece of artwork for it, and it's very compelling and mysterious. And now I want to know what's in the Seventh Citadel. So if you're at all interested in Serious Pulp stuff, you should definitely check out the Classic Edition of Seventh Continent and later next year's Seventh Citadel. And one more piece of news for this week, and that is that just before we were recording this, the night before, the Spiel des Jahres was announced, the winners of the Spiel des Jahres. And, the Spiel des Jahres was a party game called Just One, so that's not super relevant for this show, but the Kennerspiel, which is sort of the Gamer's Game Award, went to Wingspan. And I just want to say congratulations to Elizabeth Hargrave and to Stonemaier Games. It's a rock solid, fantastic game that I absolutely love. I also want to put this out there because I want everybody to know that I'm a better judge of games than Carter is. Because I wanted to give Wingspan the stomp, and Carter was just a little more hesitant than me. So let's just everybody remember who's the better member of the duo.
Noticing who is here in the room at the moment.
Yeah, Carter's not here, so I can get away with this. He doesn't listen to our show, so he'll never know. No, I'm kidding. Carter's the better one, but he was just wrong about this one. So congratulations to Wingspan and to Stonemaier Games. It's a fantastic game. If you haven't checked it out, please do. That's all for the news for this week. Big thank you to Frederick Schultz, a listener of the show who started compiling the news for us. It's been a huge help to us, and I just want to give him a shout out because he's done wonderful work. So thank you very much, Frederick. And now it is time to get into our review for Gentes. Gentes comes to us from designers Stefan Risthaus and publisher Spielworks, and in the US it's published by TMG and Game Brewer. This came out in 2019 from TMG, this reprint of it, the deluxeified reprint. The original version came out in 2017, and it plays 1 to 4 players. Gentes is the Latin word for greater groups of human beings, like tribes and nations and people. And in this game, players take on the role of ancient people who are attempting to develop by building monuments and colonizing or founding new cities in the Mediterranean Sea. And typically when I read these descriptions from games from Board Game Geek, there's a lot of thematic fluff I need to kind of pare down for the show. That is the extent of their attempt to ground this in a theme on Board Game Geek. It's not the most thematic game.
It's not super thematic. The theme is there, but it feels like they developed the mechanics and then tried to find a theme that would fit it, rather than developing a game where the theme drove the mechanics.
Yeah, in fact, I would go so far as to say, if you've played a Stefan Feld game, this has about the same level of thematic tie. It's there.
Fair enough. Yeah.
It's there. It's just, you're not going to feel it. You're not going to get, swept away in this story of...
No, there is no sweeping.
Building an ancient latrine or whatever. At least it lends itself to kind of a cool aesthetic. There aren't that many Euro games set in an ancient civilization kind of world. And I appreciate that.
Especially not in the Mediterranean. Or that whole Mediterranean region.
Oh, yeah.
This is fresh ground.
This is definitely fresh ground. No, but it is nice. I'm making fun of it, but it is actually kind of a nice aesthetic. Actually, we're just going to get right into the components here. It's maybe not the prettiest game I've ever seen in terms of the artwork.
The artwork is one of the areas where I think they tried to go thematic, because it's kind of cruder images, almost like you would see on like Grecian pottery or something like that. They didn't go with a highly detailed, really stylized, modern art. They definitely leaned into that ancient kind of cruder art form in the way they did the art for the game.
And see, actually, I think that part of it I like a little bit better.
I think it's really pretty.
Yeah, that I like. The map and some of the scoring track, it has almost like a computer textured look to it. I don't know art, okay? I'm just telling you how I perceive it, okay? So take this with a grain of salt. The map doesn't look great to me. It doesn't look bad. It just isn't a compelling board to look at. The drawings of people in that cave painting style, or like not even cave painting, but like ancient style. I think that's the technical term.
Technical term.
Yeah, I like that part of it, but otherwise it's kind of a mixed bag for me art-wise.
Yeah, I think the only thing for me where I really didn't love the board art-wise, by going with that kind of thematic artwork, colors don't really pop anywhere in this game.
No, they definitely don't. It's not as bad as, for instance, some Stefan Feld games that I've played that are 50 Shades of Beige, but this is definitely more muted, and it's not a bright and vibrant take on a Euro game. And that does stand out to me a little bit more than it used to, because, Vito Lacerda keeps putting out games that look, to my eyes anyway, absolutely gorgeous when he partners with Ian O'Toole. You've got Mind Clash games, too, that are putting out these really nice-looking games, and they're all heavily grounded in their theme.
Oh, absolutely. I'm a sucker for Mind Clash.
Oh, yeah. Man, me too. And they just... there's a lot of good and innovative things happening with thematic Euros right now. This feels like a relic of an older age in some ways. In terms of its mechanics and its theme, its ties to the theme, I guess.
I feel like in some ways I'm picking up what you're putting down there, but in other ways, the mechanics felt like a step forward on a very old paradigm for me. I was really impressed with how familiar it felt, but how different it felt with this very subtle twist on what was fundamentally a worker placement mechanic.
Oh yeah, now that's definitely true. I'm not talking about the mechanics when I say that, because those definitely feel very different and interesting. I'm just thinking about the look and the thematic ties. And we have to say here, too, this is the deluxeified TMG version of the game. And if you've never seen one of TMG's deluxeified versions, I just can't imagine the person who goes out and buys the not deluxeified version of this after they've seen one of these in person.
I feel bad for them. I don't understand how Orleans keeps selling as many copies
Well,
none of those people have to have played a deluxified copy of Orleans.
I think one thing that helps is that you can get spruced up bits so many different places now.
Oh, man. Board Game Geek spruced up bits for Orleans specifically.
Ooh, they're sweet.
Amazing.
Yeah, they're really nice. I mean, so if you do get the retail version of this game, for one thing, it's much cheaper than trying to scoop up a deluxified version of it. You can find the retail version I've seen, in the $45 to $55 range. I don't know what the MSRP is, but that's what you can buy it for. And then also I've seen some deluxified versions that are used for as low as $75, which is unusual.
I only paid, I think, $60 for the deluxified during the campaign. It might have been $65.
Yeah, but usually the markup on these things is so high because it's an exclusive product. But that does color our perception of the game's components.
Yeah, especially of the components. Unpaid plug here. If a game ever is coming from TMG and the game looks good to you and they're going to deluxify it, back it. It's going to be quality.
Yeah, in fact, I mean, the artwork is the same across the board, and for me, that's just okay. But the components in this game, in this version of it, are so sweet.
Oh, man. It's just all these little custom meeples they're all screen printed and...
Yeah. And these double-sided, or double thickness boards, I guess I should say, that have the kind of inset board, the recess boards. Ugh.
Nobody should make single layer boards anymore.
No, they shouldn't. I mean, it's a gorgeous production. Nice chunky wooden bits for like the different actions that you take off the board.
And on those, the color pops. I don't have to wonder what action type I'm picking up or things like that. Those are really well color coded.
Yeah, absolutely agree. And this also comes with metal coins in the deluxified version that are maybe my favorite metal coins in a game.
They are hefty. I love them.
Ooh, they feel so good. So if you can find a deluxified version of this, if this game sounds like it's up your alley, I mean, you should jump on that over the other version. I'm sure the other version is fine. And so I don't want to disparage it too much, but it's just that I've been to the mountaintop, and it's hard to go back. So component-wise, for the deluxified version, I can't speak to the other one. The deluxified version is amazing. I mean, it even comes with a folded space insert.
Which is not my favorite aftermarket insert I've ever bought, but is just so far beyond any other just vacuum-formed plastic insert.
Yeah, no question. So, I mean, the component-wise, this version of the game is fantastic. And then when it comes to the rules for the game, I was really impressed because this looks from the outside like a big, meaty, crunchy Euro. It is a Euro that has crunch. It's definitely not like Lacerda heavy or like Tricarion or something like that. It's definitely a slightly lower weight class than that.
No, I would put it solidly as a mid-weight Euro.
Yes.
It's not a gateway game, but it's not a Mind Clash game or something like that.
No, and what that means is that the rule set is really nice. It's a very streamlined, simple set of rules, and the crunch that you get out of the game, for me, is much more than what you would imagine from reading the rules. And that's my favorite thing to see in a game that has really great rules to depth ratio.
Absolutely.
And those seem like they're just increasingly rare, but I love it. And this game has it for sure. So very simple, easy rule set. My only thing that I would say about the rules, and this is partly tied in with the graphic design and the theme and all that, is it does use a lot of iconography. And that's definitely convenient for publishers because there's less to translate, which is an important thing to consider nowadays. But when your game's not grounded in theme very well, for me, it's hard to remember what icons mean sometimes. It's not a big deal at all, so I don't want to blow it out of proportion, but
I didn't have any trouble with the iconography in this game. This was an international release. Gamesbrewer was the German publisher, I believe, and it went all over the place. But I didn't have any trouble with the iconography even the first time I played. So I think that's just some people it's going to get to, and some people it's going to be a breeze.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And also another thing that's really nice about these rules, the solo rules for this game are so brief. I mean, it may be a half a page because it's just a couple of small columns of text. It's nothing really.
Yeah.
And now that we're reviewing games regularly, boy, that's something I appreciate more. The number of games that we have reviewed on this show that like you get all the way through this chunky rule book and it's like, okay, here's another 7 pages of rules for how to play the solo game. there's a part of me that goes, I don't really want to play it anymore. There's something nice about having a super streamlined, simple rule set. And we'll get to this a little bit more later, but the really nice thing about it is basically you're just playing the multiplayer game.
Yeah, and as someone who isn't a solo gamer, those sorts of heavy, additions to the rules really kind of scare me off from doing some of that sort of stuff. So this was a rule set that instead of scaring me off, it pulled me in because there was so little there.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's really nice, compellingly brief, I guess I should say. It's a great little rule set. And, that leads us right into the play for the game. And before we get to exactly what the solo play feels like, let's just talk a little bit about the core elements of this game, because I first heard this billed as a worker placement game set in the ancient world, and I could just feel myself going to sleep as somebody said that. But then I started to watch a couple of gameplay videos, and to call it a worker placement game, I guess it is technically.
It's kind of a backwards worker placement game. Instead of putting people onto the board, you're taking tiles off the board, but not in a Puerto Rico or, Rising Sun sort of way. Each little action has maybe a half a dozen little tiles, and you're picking up a version of that action.
And that's what I really like about this. So in this game, what you're going to be doing is building small buildings that sort of increase your empire's ability to have a economic engine and a point generating engine going over the course of the game. You're spreading your influence across the known world. There's a map on the board that you're building cities on, and you're trying to get the resources and the money necessary and the personnel, I guess, to make all of these things happen, because your main way of scoring points is on those building cards that you're going to be building during the course of the game. And what's interesting is this board is just littered at the beginning with tiles on all the different actions in the game that are sort of surrounding the map. And when it's your turn, you just pick one of these tiles up off the board and pay whatever cost is on it, and then put it on your player board in this little track at the top. And when that track at the top of your player board fills up, your turn, your round, I guess I should say, is over. And there are only 6 rounds in the game. That is worker placement technically, because if this were an action selection game, to me, action selection means I pick my actions, but there's no competition for the spaces or the actions that we're taking.
Yeah, the scarcity of those tiles makes it feel more like a worker placement game than it does action selection or something like that. And I think that's what makes it feel like worker placement kind of turned on its head, is because I took this, you can't.
Right, and it's not like you're putting a pawn down on one of those spaces to take the action and you're not blocking anybody. But when it's your turn, you take one of those tiles, and there might be 4 tiles for any one action on the board, and then once those tiles are all gone, then nobody can take the action anymore.
Right.
And getting to those spaces early is better, because some of those tiles are just inherently better tiles. They're cheaper.
Yes, and yeah, sometimes they are just cheaper, but other times you've got this economy built on 2 different resources. You've got money, which doesn't feel that easy to get at the beginning of the game.
No.
And then you have time. And time is much more of a static resource. Brandon was talking about how you slot those tiles into this little track. That track represents how much time you have left this age. And so as you slot tiles into there, the track keeps getting smaller. But the real kicker is that as you're paying for these tiles, you also have to put these little time tokens into that track as part of the payment for a lot of these things.
And for me, this is the part of the game that I love so much, because you will find yourself in this game looking at 2 versions of the same action, and one of them is going to cost more money. And you're like, why would I take that version of the action? Money's hard to get, but it costs less time. So if you spend more money, you hire more workers or whatever to do the action, and it doesn't take as much time. But whenever you take an action, you're taking that actual tile, putting it on your board, and then in addition to that, taking those little time markers and putting them onto your board. And man, your board fills up fast.
Oh, no, yeah. It never feels like you have enough time to do what you want to do, which feels thematic in a way.
Yeah, that's true.
Because as you play the game, your engine builds up, and you are able to get money easier and easier in those later rounds. You're able to just, for very little investment, get a good chunk of coin. if you've built your engine that way. But time always feels very limited.
And what's also interesting is that on that track at the beginning of the game, there are some spaces that have like a little lock symbol on them, these little lock tiles on your track on the right end. And, over the course of the game, you can take actions that allow you to remove those. So you have more spaces on your board that you can fill up before your round is done.
Yeah, kind of the equivalent of getting a new pawn in a worker placement game, but it's not either.
But you don't have to feed the locks.
No, you don't have to feed the locks.
So there's no worker feeding, which is really nice.
And what is nice is there's also a little bit of natural progression for that during the game. Twice during the game, you'll just remove a lock. Any more locks than that, you have to remove by building monuments and things like that. So you can choose to invest in that part of your economy, but it will grow very slowly on its own.
So our first game of this was a 2-player game that Will and I played together. Or I should say my first game of this.
It was mine too.
Okay, it was yours too. So what was really interesting about this game was that I bought these, or I guess I should say I drafted these building cards that I built during the game that gave me the ability to get more and more money. So that when I took this get some money action on the board, I was getting 4 times the normal amount. Will did not get any of those actions, so he was just getting the small, meager, normal amount. So I was flush with cash. But Will focused more on removing those padlocks from his board so that he had more space to put time markers and stuff. And, I felt free in some ways and then just incredibly constricted by the time. Will had a harder time paying for things, but he could take more actions than I could. Those are 2 very different play experiences. And equally compelling, I think.
Yeah, they were very compelling, and because the game is pretty short, just 6 rounds, you're not going to have a ton of opportunity to invest in both.
Right. That's definitely true. You have to pick a path and kind of stick with it. And in fact, that's sort of a theme throughout this game, I guess, is at the beginning of the game, you're going to draft some building cards into your hand that you can have for when you're ready to actually build them. And you want to pick cards that use the same resources or use the same kind of personnel, basically, so that you can build them efficiently. And you want to pick cards that have the same symbols on them in this upper right-hand corner, because the more matching symbols you have at the end of the game, the more points you get. And so in many ways, this is a game that is about saying, where can I find overlap here? And make sure that I'm making the most out of whatever few resources I can get. It's a game definitely of picking your niche and sticking with it. And I guess at the end of the day, it's a game that's all about efficiency.
There's a ton of that in there, but I also played another 2-player game of that against Carter. And Carter went hard on making sure all of his symbols matched. Which the way the symbol scoring works is that every time you play a card, you score however many points that card is worth and however many symbols you can match with other cards you've already played. So if you're constantly reinvesting into the same kind of category of cards, your points just start skyrocketing. I ignored those little symbols and just built the engine I wanted to. So I got some points here and there, but I had this beautifully crafted engine and Carter was just killing me in points. But the third age of the game, those extra points on the cards go away, and the point value of those cards skyrockets. So there's this catch-up mechanic built up in there if you want to invest in just building the precise engine you want, rather than kind of slotting into one of these tracks.
But you run the risk of that engine not running long enough to win you the game,
which
absolutely.
Is
what happened with you and Carter.
It was close.
Okay, yeah, I'm not saying it wasn't close. But by the way, I've said many times on this show that Carter sort of regularly kicks my tail in games, and he plays it off like he doesn't. But he is, I have somebody else here who can attest, he's quite good.
Oh, Carter is quite good.
Yeah,
yes.
Yeah. So don't let him tell you otherwise, folks. It's just such an interesting feel for a game because in many ways, it is about finding these sort of combos that work well together. Just, getting all the same symbol on your building cards, or making sure that you have building cards that overlap in the resources you need to build them. But then everything feels tight. And so it's a weird mixture of, I don't have enough time, I don't have enough money to do things that I want to do. And yet I feel like by the end of the game, I'm playing down cards that give me, at the beginning of the game, I'm getting 2 points for playing down a card. At the end of the game, I'm getting 18.
Yeah.
And it feels like there's a real sense of growth there over the course of the game. And so it gives you both the agony of every decision you make feeling like I'm doing this wrong. And then the victory of being like, pow, give me these 18 points, And I don't know, that to me, that's fantastic.
Oh, yeah. No, when you're dropping those huge point cards at the end, or even, I found it incredibly satisfying at the end of the game in in-game scoring, if you have cards left in your hand that you can pay for but haven't had the time to build, you get half scoring on those. So a lot of times my last thing I would do in a game is just snatch up as many cards as I could that I would get half credit for. And it was just, it felt like free points in a sneaky way. And it was just so satisfying.
See, I like that because, there are so many Euros that seem to fit in either one category or the other, right? Like you play a game of Agricola and it's agonizing all the way through. And by the end, you're like, I won with 14 points. My family has eked out a meager existence on this little plot of land.
Gosh, I feel like Agricola is just don't starve.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Don't starve the game. And meanwhile, like now, there are all these Euros that are, here's all the riches. Take all the riches.
Do anything you want.
And make all the points. And I mean, I like both of those games in different ways, but this one says, here, have both of them. In a way that I really like.
Yeah. In so many ways, I felt like this game, I understand what you're saying about earlier, you said it kind of felt like a throwback in some ways. To me, it almost felt more classic than throwback. This game felt like a really tightened classic Euro game to me.
That's a good way to say it. Although, again, when I'm thinking of throwback, I'm thinking about art direction and theme. I think the mechanics here are novel. And not just gimmicky novel. They feel like they're here to stay, I guess.
It felt novel and familiar in that way that it was just, yes, this is how this game should play. Why hasn't anybody else already done this?
Yeah, exactly. That feeling of how has somebody not done this before is one of my favorites in games because it feels like such a revelation without being a burden rules-wise, I guess.
Absolutely.
And so, I love that balance of the track at the top of the board, and that's also complemented by the people that you hire throughout the game.
Yeah, your primary resource for paying for cards is, do you have enough workers to build these cards? And there's 6 different types of workers, and as you hire workers, a late game you can end up in this push-pull mechanic. You can only have so many of each pairing of workers. So if you hire too many of one type, it actually kind of locks you out of hiring another unless you want to lose the first type.
Yeah, which is really interesting because when you look at your board, there are, 3 tracks where you can buy workers? There's 6 different kind of worker types. And I say workers here, and that makes people think probably of how I take actions, but just think of these as just 6 different types of resources, essentially. And
it's a static resource. Once you have them, you have them. You're not paying them.
Right, which is very nice. And when you gain them, on that top row, there might be a priest and a builder.
Politician? Yeah, maybe builder? I don't know. I'm not looking at a board.
No, I'm not looking at it either. But they're on either end of one track. And so if I increase the priest, I'm moving him up from left to right on the track. I'm moving his little marker on the track there. And if I move the builder, I'm moving him from right to left on the track. And they can meet in the middle. If you want to have more of one than the other, then you've got to push the worker aside so you have fewer of the other type. And that sounds like a small thing, but it's super cool to me. And the game rewards you for trying to max out those worker types.
Well, and it rewards you for playing efficiently as well, because late game, if you're getting a worker that you need to accomplish something, you might be losing another worker, which means that whatever work you did to do that, get that worker earlier is now just gone. So it does reward you for thinking ahead as to what you need, when you need it, because if you overcommit in one area, you might waste that commitment later in the game.
Yeah, and all of this comes together to just be this tight and interesting puzzle where, you have, if you're playing multiplayer, you have these different goals where the first person to like max out their workers gets 8 points. The first person to, build towns and all of this type of land gets points, or
build all 6 of your towns.
All 6 of your towns. That's what it is. And you'll get 8 victory points. The second person to do it has a chance to get 4.
Right.
If you complete it.
Yeah. Anyone else who does complete that action will get half points.
Yeah.
It's not just the second one.
So there's a lot of tension in the multiplayer game of like, do I want to take this cheaper action now? Maybe it'll still be there next round. Like, I really don't have the resources to pay for the more expensive version of it. But I want to do this other thing, and then I want to build on this spot on the map now because I don't feel like he'll go there, but you never know. I mean, that's the classic worker placement tension,
right?
That's there all the way through. And it comes together at the end of the game in a very satisfying way where you feel like you've accomplished a lot. And what's interesting here is that in the solo game, all of those mechanics are basically the same. There's a 3 and 4 player side of the board and a 1 and 2 player side. So you just play on the 1 and 2 player side of the board. It's scaled for you already.
Yeah, it's beautiful how they removed some of the locations. They removed some of the action tiles. It just tightens up that board and it's easy to play. I think the 2-player game adds one new rule to the game where if you were playing with more people, there's a market of cards that you're buying from. And we talked about how the cards are your main kind of point engine. In a 4-player game, people are going to be buying those cards. In a 2-player game, they just add a little artificial mechanism that if people aren't buying cards that particular turn, the market still moves some.
Yeah, you just put a little cube on those cards on certain spaces, and those will disappear at the end of the round.
Right, and they actually go back to the box.
Right, not to the discard.
Kind of to simulate that somebody else bought them and now you can't have them.
And when you play solo, basically you just add an extra cube to one of those cards. So essentially there are more cards that are being taken out of the market row.
The market actually stays the exact same. You add a cube to the market where you're buying workers, which is a different market.
Right.
It's a different action.
Oh, that's right. So in either case, though, you're basically, the game is sort of artificially telling you, cycle these things out to simulate a 4-player game.
Just get a little bit of movement in there so things don't get stagnant.
It's almost no upkeep on your part.
Oh, it's clean.
Very clean, almost identical to playing the 2-player game. The only other addition is there's a wild action tile that's added to the board that's now there for you that can be used as any kind of action.
Yeah, it goes into the spot on the board where normally you would take the first player marker, which, shout out, is this huge... I love first player markers. There's something very satisfying about a good first player marker. And this one is massive. It's like a big old building top.
Yeah, it looks super cool. And yeah, so this just takes the place of that.
Yeah, so instead of that spot on the board being first player action, it becomes a wild action. And it's kind of an expensive wild action. This is the one spot where I ran into a rules issue in the 1-player game. Because what the rules say is, if you take this wild action, you can do any action. It costs 6 money and 2 time. Like I said, it's kind of expensive. The weird thing about that, though, is a lot of actions, the amount of money you spend defines how well you get to do that action. It defines how many cards you get to buy from a market or how many workers you get to hire. And it wasn't well defined to me whether or not that 6 coin locked me into a 6 coin version of that action, or whether or not I could take a 10 coin version of that action.
Yeah, that is definitely confusing. I didn't end up using the wild tile in mine, but I mean, it's definitely there and something you should consider using. So it'd be nice if that was a little more clear.
We haven't compared scores yet. That may be the better option. Well, I didn't score super well.
Yeah, I didn't score super well either. Let's not compare scores.
If you say so.
The way this game works, though, is you just play it otherwise exactly like a multiplayer game. Only you don't wait on somebody else to take their turn. There is no automa. There is nothing like that. You just play out the 6 rounds, and then you check your score against a chart in the book. And if you score below 70 points, it's considered a loss. And actually, the rulebook tells you to play again and again and again until you score at least 70 points without stopping.
You can do better than this.
Yes. And then otherwise, there's just like a ranking chart, and it's a beat your own score variant, I guess, similar to like what's in Role Player or many other games that just give you a rank based on how well you did.
And this ranking chart goes up so high that I don't understand how it's mathematically possible to get this many points.
I don't either. It bodes well for me that you say that, because I felt like, boy, that's out of reach forever. What that means, though, is there doesn't need to be a difficulty, change rule or anything like that in here. There's no difficulty setting. There's just, can you do better than before? And a lot of people are really down on beat your own score variants. I'm one of those people in general. But when you add one of these ranking systems, I do like it considerably more. I know that's a dumb thing, but just give me some kind of baseline to compare against.
Absolutely. As someone who, this is the first solo Euro style game I've ever played. Without that in the end of the rulebook, I would have no idea of, did I do good?
Right. I don't understand why you wouldn't include something like that in there. And honestly, these kind of variants are growing on me because, if you add in an automa, you're adding in at least another couple of pages to explain to me how the automa works, if it's a decent automa. And I like those. I really do. But there's sometimes when I just want to sit down and play the game that I learned so that I could play it with my friends, and not have to learn a bunch of extra stuff. It's nice. It's relaxing and crunchy at the same time. And it plays quickly, too.
It did play really quickly. I think a game for me took about 45 minutes.
Yeah, that's about how long it took me, which is really nice for a pretty crunchy Euro solo experience. So, if you're not into the kind of beat your own score ranking thing, that's fine. But just want you to know that that's in there. For me, it worked out okay. And it's not my absolute favorite way to play a solo game, but it is an easier way, and I'll probably play it more than some of those cooler versions.
I just felt pretty good about it because the more I played, my numbers did go up mostly steadily.
Yeah, I think that did for me too. Not by much, but a little bit. So that's how it plays. I would say, as far as replayability is concerned, you do have, of course, the challenge of beating your score and getting to those higher ranks, which for some people will be more of a draw than others. There's definitely variability in when cards come out, building cards for you. And there's some cards that are set aside at the beginning of every game. So there's, there's definitely variability in what cards come out.
You set aside a decent number of those tier 1 cards, but the other 2 decks, you barely set us any aside. I think they're just counting on you not getting that many of them out onto the board to generate some variability.
But the building cards are significant, though, because you do get a couple at the beginning of the game that are going to sort of determine your direction for the game.
They're huge. Yeah, we've been talking about these cards like they're just cards. These things make massive changes in the way that you can play the game, as far as, they might give you entirely new actions that you can take. They might, like Brandon said, that just start adding multipliers to your other actions. Another area on the board that we didn't discuss at all, there's a little space on the board where you can build cities that's not on the main map. And when you build there, it gives you access to kind of ways to change the rules of these core actions. Because when it comes down to it, there's only like 5 core actions you're taking in the game. So this ability to kind of tweak those core actions really does change the way your engine feels from game to game. Yeah,
I completely agree. And so I guess in some ways I want to say the replayability, it doesn't feel that high to me because it's not like you're playing an automa opponent that's a fresh experience every time, right? And there's not a player power deck or something that you get. But the way you draft those cards at the beginning of the game does dramatically change how you play. It's not like other Euros where you just have to decide, I'm going to try a different strategy this game in order to make it feel different.
Yeah, I think the replayability is going to be okay. I don't think it's going to be good. I don't think it's going to wow anybody. But I think there's going to be just, solidly fine replayability.
Yeah, I think that's fair. You're not going to just play it over and over again constantly. But if you play it even a handful of times a year, I think you'll get a good experience every time.
Yeah, this will never be a lifestyle game.
No, but definitely not.
It's not going to feel like... when I sit down to play Caverna at this point, before I play the game, I think, okay, how am I going to not play the same game of Caverna?
Right, which is my one major knock against the game. Of course, now they've mitigated that somewhat with the different player abilities and powers and that sort of thing. But vanilla Caverna, that was my primary issue with it. So this is definitely not that.
Right.
It's definitely not. And actually, that leads us right into the way we cap off all of our reviews, where we talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly for this game. And, for me, if you couldn't tell from listening to this review, there's a lot of good in here. I mean, especially for this deluxified version, it's gorgeous. It's not the prettiest art ever, but it's made up for by all those chunky bits.
Coins.
Yeah. It's a wonderful production, and I mean, really something for TMG to be proud of, I think. So it looks good on the table, which is, for me, one of those things. I mean, I don't care how shallow it sounds. I'm more likely to get a game out if it has good table presence.
It makes it more satisfying to play when you're moving around something that just, it looks nice, it feels nice.
Yeah.
So much of board gaming is a tactile, physical, visceral, experience. And so those things matter to me.
Yeah, they matter to me too. That's part of why I play this and not a video game, for instance. There's like feeling the bits with your hand is a big deal. And I mean, there's also the rules to depth ratio for this game is very good for me. I love that it's a streamlined set of rules with a lot of crunch and a very short play time. 45 minutes. Come on, that's great for a good, solid Euro game. That's kind of my sweet spot length, really. I mean, the core thing for me that I love about this game is that time, money decision. That is so good.
It's so hard to communicate how familiar but different it feels at the same time. It is just a really satisfying spin on that core worker placement mechanic.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And so all that comes together for me to create a really good, solid experience as a core game. Plus, on top of it, very nice, simple solo rule set. And that goes solidly in the good category for me as well.
Absolutely. I think, all of those are great things for me.
Things that I would consider, we call it bad. And I'm not even going to say it's bad, really. It's just things that I don't like that much. The lack of a theme here, it's a cool vibe they've got going on. I wish they could have grounded a little bit more in the theme. That's a minor complaint, but it's just there. If you like thematic games, you will be disappointed with this.
Yeah, the theme is not deep, but like I said, I feel like they came up with a really good rule system and then found a theme that worked.
Yeah, I think
it
that's
doesn't
true.
Fight the mechanics.
No, it's not. Again, it's not bad. It's just, it's not what Euro games can be that we have seen recently. Other things that I would put in this category are, if you get this game now, you're probably getting the retail edition. And so if you want it to look a little more spiffy, you need to either pay out a little bit extra to get the deluxified version, or you just need to buy some components to upgrade it. Again, the retail version is probably not bad, but just by comparison, it feels like you're missing out. And that's not a great feeling when you get a new game.
But it's so common in the hobby at this point.
Yeah, I know, but it's still something that I can't get over. I mean, I don't like the fear of missing out. And for me, most of the time, it doesn't make a difference. People think they want everything for a game, but they don't really, because you're not going to play it that many times. Get the retail version, people. For the most part, just get that. You don't want all that Kickstarter stuff. I mean, you do, but you don't need it. It will be totally playable, fine. And I'm sure even by, 5 years ago standards, good production.
Oh, 5 years ago? Yeah. I'm sure the retail at this point would be mind-blowingly good for 5 years ago.
Yeah. It's not a bad game. It's just, anyway, we've gone over that enough. But I'm putting that here in this category. Replayability, I'm not going to say it's bad, but I'm going to put it more in this category than the other one.
It doesn't belong in the good category. So if we're going to mention it, like I said, it's fine.
Yeah. The main bad thing for me, though, is what you lose in the solo game here is the loss of tension. The multiplayer game is so tense, just waiting, trying to decide when to take this action versus another one, trying really hard to beat your opponent and getting to those victory point goals. The victory point goals are still there, but they're just automatically going to turn from 8 victory points to 4 at a certain point in the game.
I think it's at the end of round 5. And I did like how they kind of gave you that, little bit of, if you can get it done fast enough.
Yeah. It's a good solution. I'm not even knocking the solution. It's just that simple rule sets give you so much more ability to get the game to the table and just to play your turn and all that. What they lose is that kind of, do I do this now or do I do it later? And, you have to figure out for yourself where you are on that. That's a large part of why I play a Euro game, though.
Yeah, I did feel like in the solo version of this game, the tension was gone. I didn't play this game turn by turn in a sense of I'm taking this action and now I'm going to plan the next action and now I'm going to plan my next action. I played it turn by turn in the sense that there are 6 main turns in the game. So I would plan out everything I was going to do and accomplish in one of those main 6 turns, figure out how all the little bits lined up on my track, and then just execute all of that at once.
Yeah.
There was no tension there.
I don't play games that way, but I'm just more fly by the seat of my pants, I guess. But it's even playing that way, it didn't feel tense at all to me. It still felt just like I'm playing a Euro game, and it's like a nice mechanics. I'm enjoying the mechanics, but the tension, the competition is gone. So
yeah,
for some people that will be great. But if you enjoy the agony that comes with playing worker placement multiplayer, if you are a masochist in that way, that piece of it is definitely absent in the solo experience.
Yeah, it felt very kind of flat in that particular dynamic.
And ultimately,
in a way that it didn't in the multiplayer games.
No, it definitely didn't in the multiplayer game. It felt, bad, but in a good way, That's my main knock against it. And I don't have anything ugly to say about this game at all.
The only thing that, like I said, I never found any sort of clarification on that one solo player wild rule.
Oh, yeah.
And it left me just wondering, did I cheat? I'm not sure if I cheat. I might have cheated.
That's a good point.
And to me, that was a little ugly. I mean, if anybody had just said anything on BGG about it, I would have felt fine. But it's just, I couldn't find anything.
Yeah, the total silence is disturbing, isn't it?
And I don't even think... I don't blame anybody for it. It was just one of those things where I happened to run up against this one spot in the rules where it didn't feel like it was clear like it was everywhere else in the rule book.
Yeah. If you hear crying in the background, that is my daughter / my insides as I think about how there's not a good clarification for the rule in this game. Yeah, that is the one gripe I would have with the rules. Overall, the rule set's great. It's just, that definitely should have been clarified a little bit better. Overall, though, I don't have anything ugly to say about the game. It's a good game. It's a really good game if you play it multiplayer. When it comes down to it, though, would you give it the stomp of approval?
I wouldn't give it the stomp, and it's because of that kind of clarification that y'all say, would you buy this game to only ever play it solo? I wouldn't. I enjoyed it solo. It was fun. But I don't think it was worth my money if I wasn't going to play it with people. Yeah,
I agree. I really enjoy it, but with that being one of the qualifications, I can't give it the stomp in good conscience. I will say, though, if you think you're going to play this multiplayer and this is the kind of game that your group would enjoy, and you would like to know if you can play this solo on the side to get like a little more value out of it, absolutely.
Solid purchase.
Yeah, very solid purchase. Very enjoyable game that feels different, but again, familiar. And in that respect, it's a great choice. Just for solo, though,
something with a Meteor AI, I'd say, if you're going to buy it just for solo play.
Yeah, I have one in mind, and I'm looking at it on my shelf right now, and I can't wait to do a review for it, but you'll just have to wait. Oh, I don't want to spoil it. So there are other games out there that would be a better fit for this. You'll hear about that more in the future. Until next time, though, this is not going to get the stomp from us, but still really solid game.
Absolutely.
And that's the end of this episode, folks. If you like this show and you want to find other great board game shows like it, you can go check out the Dice Tower Network. We are a member of that network. If you don't know the Dice Tower, it's a fantastic podcast and YouTube channel that does reviews of games that helped me to fall in love with board games in the first place. And there's so many different podcasts in the network. You can go to dicetowernetwork.com to learn more about those. You can also follow us on Facebook and Instagram. We're pretty easy to find. We post pictures sometimes about what we're playing and what just got in and all that sort of thing. I don't like social media that much, but I try really hard for you all to put up some pictures from time to time. So if you want to see those, you can follow us on there. If you haven't yet, please write a review for us on iTunes for the show. Sounds like a very small thing, but it does help us to make the show visible to more people. So even if you don't use iTunes regularly, just, dredge it up out of the depths of your apps folder and go leave us a review on there. And also, I've said this now several times, if you like the show, you want to have a micro badge on Board Game Geek that says that you're a fan, you can get one. We have one, and I'm happy to spot you the Geek Gold to get it. Every time I announce this, I have 2 or 3 people who take me up on it. I'm serious, folks. Reach out to me on Board Game Geek, and I am more than happy to send you the Geek Gold, and I want to see those little yellow and purple dinosaurs just everywhere. So, send me a message.
Time to stampede.
Time to stampede, y'all. Until next time, I'm Brandon Waite.
And I'm Will Hedrick.
And this is Solosaurus.